We are welcoming you to another edition of Urban Strategy in the Present Tense. This time, we're going to be exploring the plans for Hilco's Bellwether District, progress, planning, and outreach. I am your host, Andrew Zitcer. I'm an associate professor of urban strategy at Drexel University in the Westphal College of Media, Art, and Design. And I'm thrilled today to be joined by Hazel Steinberg and Jasmine Sessoms. I'm going to give their bios, and then we're going to go into a series of questions, and then we'll have Q&A from the audience. You can place your questions in the Q&A box. I'm joined by Tom Devaney and Hazel Dequito, who are our producers for this webinar, and I want to extend an excited thank you to them for all of their hard work in making this happen. At the end of the time we're together, I'll explain a little bit more about the urban strategy program at Drexel. But before I get into that, I want to just let people know that we have a very special Lindy Urban Innovation Scholarship that's available between now and April 1st. There are a small number of merit-based scholarships available. And so I just want to encourage you to visit the Urban Strategy website on drexel.edu, and Hazel may be able to put the link in the chat, where you can learn more about these urban innovation scholarships between now and April 1, when we'll be awarding them. So more to come on that at the end of the conversation. Let me begin by introducing my guests. Jasmine Sessoms is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Hilco Redevelopment Partners, where she oversees community and government outreach efforts in Philadelphia. She is known for building trust and collaboration between HRP and local residents, groups, and institutions. Jasmine's background includes serving as Managing Executive Director of the Mayor's Fund, leading her own political fundraising firm, and earning a master's degree in organizational development and leadership from Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. She currently serves as a trustee of Cheney University and is a board member of Philadelphia Works. Welcome, Jasmine.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to share a little bit about the Bellwether District.
Thanks. And we also have Hazel Steinberg, who is a respected urban planning professional in the greater Philadelphia region and the founding executive director of the Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation at Drexel, where he works on innovative strategies for advancing cities equitably. His work at the Lindy Institute includes the 2020 A Vision for the Lower Schuylkill, and he is currently supporting Philadelphia Parks and Recreation on a plan to pedestrianize the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. Previously, he directed collaborative projects at Penn Praxis and has worked on notable projects such as the landmark Civic Vision for the Central Delaware planning process and action plans for Philadelphia's parks and open spaces. Steinberg is an elected fellow of the American Institute of Architects and has served on the Philadelphia Historical Commission. Welcome, Harris.
Thank you, Andrew. Great to see you and Jasmine, and it's good to be here.
So I'd like to start by asking you both to provide us with a brief background of your interest in and connection to Hilco's project in the Bellwether District. So Jasmine, since you're the representative of Hilco and the Bellwether District, just tell us a little bit about how you are related to this project.
So one, I'm employed by the project, so I absolutely love it. But even before that, I remember knowing about the refinery since I was younger. I'm from South Philadelphia, so I always, just like most Philadelphians, drove by it. I used to make sure to see the smell. And to be very honest with you, I didn't even know that it was for sale. I knew that there was an explosion. I didn't know it was for sale. My boss, Roberto Perez, he actually was referred to me. We had one conversation in the middle of COVID, and I was kind of like, who would develop that refinery? It's huge. Instantly. For me, I really focus on more of the community engagement, always government relations, our time comm strategy, definitely DEI, and near and dear to my heart, our workforce. And the fact that a very large real estate company even had a position like that available in a senior position was really intriguing to me. So that's how I got connected with the Bellwether.
Awesome. And the rest is sort of history in progress,
History and progress. There you go. We are just starting on this
making
history.
history. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Harris, another Philadelphia native, can you talk a little bit about your own interest and connection with the Hilco project, the Bellwether district, and the refinery?
Definitely, yes. And as a Philadelphia native, I have kind of circumnavigated this site my whole life. Very rarely, until recently, have I actually been onto the site. But given its strategic location, its scale, and its importance in the history of Philadelphia, I was drawn to it particularly over the past 10 to 15 years as the future of the refinery came into play. Back in 2012, Sunoco was selling the property, and there was a possibility it might transition to other uses. At that time, Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation was doing a master plan for the Lower Schuylkill. We at Penn Praxis were helping to support that with some research and analytic work. So I've kind of been able to kind of get to understand just the enormity of it. And I think its strategic importance in terms of its location within, within 5 miles or less of Center City, Philadelphia. There's really very few parcels like this that is located so strategically between the airport, the Navy Yard, University City, and Center City, and yet was a black hole to Philadelphians for 150 years. So my interest as a planner, and really as a long-term person who thinks long-term, is to figure out how now that Hilco has taken an asset and is repurposing it for logistics and life science uses. What's the long-term play here, even beyond all that? Because Philadelphia cities change, they evolve. Back to William Penn, what is now Vines 1882, and it gives the city its sense of scale, and it's really its sense of self. So what's the corollary for a site that's larger than Center City at 1,300 to 1,400 acres? It's enormous, and its potential is enormous. So hopefully within there, I've answered the question of why I'm interested.
Definitely. And there's a lot. So I want to ask Jasmine, the scope of the project is a massive undertaking given the scale of the site and the scale of the need for its transformation. Would you be able to provide us with a brief overview of the Bellwether district as a whole and highlight some of its key components?
Yeah, of course. So like Harris said, the last time such a large undertaking for master planning was done, it was 10, 16. So we are doing something extremely, has few facts of where we are development-wise. We officially owned our site January 26th of 2020. So still right in the middle of COVID, Hilco Redevelopment Partners purchased the old PES Refinery. And since that time of January 26, 2020, we've removed 865 miles of pipe. I mean, literally the amount of pipes from on the site stretch from Philadelphia all the way to Jacksonville, Florida. So we've removed 865 miles of those pipes. We have removed 18.5 million gallons of petroleum product from the tanks. So that's unheard of. And I just want to say this was supposed to be a 4-year process. We are entering year 3 and we're almost done. So we are ahead of schedule, which is a huge testament to our demo team and our operations team. A lot of them were actually former refinery workers that we retained to help us decommission it, because who's better to decommission it than the people that were running it and know it very intimately. To date, there are about 250, on a great day, 300 people working on our site per day at our peak, right? So we are still employing a good amount of people to help us take this down. 90% of our tanks are demolished, 91% of the pipes are removed, 99% of the petroleum product, 92% of the demolition, and actually I just got a new stat today, it's 94% of our demolition is completed. So we are all moving full steam ahead. And I don't know how familiar people are with our site, but it's 1,300 acres. It's larger than Center City. It's almost just as large as University City. So we city, our times it by 2, there will be a light space as well. But again, we are entering year 3. We're not even in year 3 yet. And so we are still really figuring it out, listening to the community, listening to our stakeholders, but full steam ahead. Just by us taking this refinery offline, we reduced the emissions in Philadelphia by 16%. So we are really making a difference every single day that we show up and come to work, and really are trying to transform that refinery for an economic engine in Philadelphia.
I'm really struck, Jasmine, by the just sheer volume of material that had to be moved off the site. Do you know anything about where that all ended up? I know that there was probably some that was salvaged because it had value, like metals and materials like copper that have some resale value. But where does all that stuff go?
So we do recycle, like you said, Andrew, we do recycle a lot of the pipes and the steel and the copper. I am not going to venture into where we put the dirt and things like that, because that is a whole different subset. Again, I do focus on community government, workforce development, and things like that. But those are the stats where we are right now. But we do recycle some of the copper and the steel and the pipes.
Great. Now, Harris, of what you know, whether it's your plans for a life cycle, a life science, and about what you've heard so far, and what are some questions that you might have about the plan
for
as
me,
you
I think the most important thing that Hilco is doing has been the decommissioning of the refinery and the repurposing of the site for different uses. I see the evolution. Past 150 years were about oil extraction, refining, and storing. What are the next 150 years like? And so I see Hilco's work as being a critical step in decommissioning the petrochemical kind of business that's been on the site for 150 years and beginning to pivot towards the future. At the moment, I think they're thinking about very large blocks of buildings that would be Amazon fulfillment type warehousing, as well as large scale light manufacturing for the life sciences. What I would love to see is that the plan for 25 years from now and 50 years from now. At the moment, the site is not being remediated to residential standards, but in the future, it would be great to be able to have that option so that ultimately the city could grow down into this area. Again, imagine an area larger than all of Center City with its 70,000 people, 70,000 residents, 200,000 in what Center City District calls Greater Center City. This is an enormous site with enormous potential for housing, for residential, for recreation, for all sorts of uses. So things change over time. We know that there's no constant. So what I would love to see is a plan that's adaptable. William Penn's plan originally called for 4-acre parcels in Center City. Those immediately got broken down with little streets into tiny, more marketable parcels. That's the kind of thinking that I think would be really important to start to think about kind of selling this for the future.
And just to follow up with you, Harris, knowing that you have an extensive experience in community engagement and in civic design, thinking about some of the things you learned from previous projects, do you have any helpful lessons or guidance that might be useful to think about for the Bellwether district, just based on your career in doing this work?
Well, a lot of the work that I've done, some of it has been highly contentious, such as when we did the work along the Central Delaware in 2006 to 2007, the Pennsylvania legislature had just allowed gambling as an economic development tool in Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia would get 1, possibly 2 casinos. At the time, we were not allowed to say where they could go. We had no zoning prerogative over them. That was overturned, but it was clear that there'd be 1, possibly 2 along the Central Delaware. So when I was asked to lead that process, the casinos and the anti-casino forces were very strong. And so they drove a lot of the participation in the process. And I learned early on, not only from that project, but previous ones, as well as subsequent ones, that what you got to do first is listen. It took us 4 months out of a 13-month process just to kind of listen to neighbors, to understand kind of what their concerns were, to try to get to some sort of fact-based dialogue around the future of the waterfront, not just about casinos, because casinos are going to change over time. They may be here today, but they're not necessarily going to be there in 50 years. They may not look like that in 50 years. So from my experience, and I know Jasmine has done a lot of this, it's listening, it's engaging, it's trying to get to a sense of what values citizens hold in terms of the regeneration of their neighborhood, what's important to them, and how those kind of values can inform principles for the design of the project. And that's exactly what we did along the Central Delaware. And to much to our surprise, it was very successful, and it is guiding actually the development of the waterfront today.
That's a good segue for us to kind of move into talking a little bit about community engagement. Jasmine, could you walk us through some of the community outreach process and explain how the insights gathered are shaping the project plans?
Have to get off mute. Yeah, absolutely. So we are all about community engagement. It is one of our 3 pillars: environment, economy, and community. We understand that we have to become part of the fabric in the communities in which we build. So we perform consistent community engagement. So get ready. This is going to be a very long list. We have quarterly public meetings, right? Where we now allow two-way conversations so that we can hear our residents and we can speak to them directly. We have a community advisory panel that is made up of about 26 stakeholder groups that equals out to about 52 residents in South and Southwest. And they were the community advisory panel that the refinery had. So they were the groups most affected by the fence line. Not only that, but we have consistent community engagement events. So one very recent one was a community health fair. There is no formalized healthcare system in our neighborhood. So we have actually brought healthcare to our community, where we partnered with various health systems, and they were able to get checkups and clinic updates and things like that right there on Point Breeze Avenue. We do fall festivals in the community. It is consistent community engagement because you don't build a city without talking to the residents first. And we have done a community survey that has gone far and wide to listen to where should we really be doing investments. And a lot of people want investments in youth programs, education, environment. Workforce is overwhelmingly what our community wants, so that we have responded to those needs. And we talk to our elected officials about what do their constituents want. I remember when we first bought the site in the summertime, from July and August, I would sit in the park every Tuesday all day long with my laptop so that residents, it was Stinger Square Park, residents would come and speak to me about the concerns of the site. I was extremely accessible. Now I have a team. Mia, who's on my team, also is within the community. We go to individual community meetings, right? So if you are a community group within our 6 zip codes, we're more than happy to come to the community meeting, speak about the project, hear what's going on in the community. So it is constant, Andrew, because to Harris's point, you need to talk to the residents first. Although I am a South Philly native, I do not know anything and everything about what our residents need. So we really wanted to take a good stock and accountability and really move with our residents. And to your point, Harris, grow, right? Because what was good for our residents 2 years ago isn't necessarily great for them in 2023. So it's a constant two-way dialogue that we're doing with our community. And we're happy, we're listening, we're open, and we are really excited about building in Philadelphia.
Jasmine, I have 2 follow-ups. The first is we teach in the urban strategy program a course called Civic Engagement and Participatory Methods.
Yeah.
And so I'm very interested in what your methods were for designing community engagement and community outreach, because it's, to me, not something that is kind of intuitive for all kind of developers to think about how to do kind of sustained and thorough. So was this kind of like an evolutionary process where you added things as they were needed, or did you go in with a kind of communications plan? Just trying to think about our students, how would we go about doing this kind of engagement?
No, that's a really great point. You're absolutely right, Andrew. Developers do not necessarily put this in the forefront, but you're in luck. I wasn't a developer. I come from a background of service. So before Hilco Redevelopment Partners, I was at CCP. I ran our city foundation. Before that, I ran corporate foundation. I've worked in nonprofits. So I actually come from a service background. And our CEO, Roberto Perez, had the foresight to say, I don't want someone that has been in real estate for 30 plus years. I need somebody from outside of real estate. So honestly, where I started was a community map. I looked at the assets that we had, the assets that were in the community, had a community meeting, and it was a dialogue around what should we be investing in first and foremost. So I started with the very basic community map template. And I'm sure that in your civic engagement class, that's something that you guys use as well, is the community mapping and looking at the pictures that our residents were sending in around the park situation. So one of the first things that we did was adopt 2 parks that are right in our backyard, because they were sending me pictures of like just the depleted parks. And that was something really high up on the list. I spoke to all the local public schools. So Autumn Reed is one, South Philadelphia, Bartram was one, and really like talking to the teachers and the principal and figuring out what are the investments that I can push them forward. So it was very calculated. It was definitely systematic, but it evolved, right? There is no handbook about community engagement. It has to evolve with the community that you're in, because here's the thing, I don't just work in Philly, I work in Boston, I work in Chicago, I work in Alexandria, I work in California. No 2 communities are the same. So you really tailor your method based on the community in which you're building.
And then my second follow-up, which I think stems from that, are sort of like, in the Philadelphia case, what are a couple of things that you learned from that process that really, like, oh my God, I didn't realize I needed to do this way, pivot, I need to operate in this other way. And then also, what was like a really hard thing? What was a challenge that you encountered? You know, we know Philly is not always the easiest city to work in.
No, can I be honest? Like, safe space, we're all squirrel friends here. I am, I was truly in shock at how many people do not like Zoom meetings. I am a Zoom fanatic. Like, if I can just be in my office or stay in my house and meet all of you, all 58 of us, that is a dream for someone like me. But you know what, Andrew? You know what, Harris? It's not a dream for our community. So we had to make a few adjustments. That was actually shocking to me, especially with like COVID going on. People were missing being in person. And really, if not in person, having a two-way dialogue. They didn't want to type their questions in the chat. They wanted to unmute themselves. That was actually probably one of the most shocking things to me, is how much people crave that one-on-one attention and crave really being in person with one another and feeding off of each other's energy. And then you ask something that like, tell me something really tough. Oh, Andrew, pick a day. Okay, we are building a city within a city. Pick a day. And you're absolutely right. Philadelphia is a tough place to build, right? From our government to our communities to even just some of the legislation that we have to go through. But I think when I have really tough days, and when sometimes my point isn't getting across that this is really for the community, and it's a regional project, right? But it's also a national project, and really trying to explain how just absolute challenging it is to take down a 154-year-old refinery. It gets lost. And sometimes that's really tough because people want answers right then, right there. And it's like, guys, we are 2.5 years into a 15-year project. Our plan is still evolving. We're still growing and learning every day, but we have smart people like Harris that keeps us accountable. Harris, we came a long way, didn't we, friend? But we need people like Harris in this city. Hilco redevelopment partners need people like Harris that care about our site and hold us accountable. And sometimes that's tough, right? Sometimes you get called out on Front Street and you're like, but we're doing everything right. Well, we think we're doing everything right. But people like Harris and yourself, Andrew, are really, really smart, and you're invested in our project. We need to hear from you guys too, but sometimes it's a little tough. So bear with me, give me grace if I'm not necessarily giving you warm hugs all the time.
Harris, I wanted to see if you had any thoughts or follow-ups. I mean, one of the things I had on my list to ask you about is your own experience in community engagement on previous projects and what value you think it adds to those projects. And I want to open that question up to you, and then also if you have any follow-ups for Jasmine.
I think civic engagement is critical to any recognizing the value of what we now call civic engagement. I didn't know that's what it was when I was first doing it. But in a representative, only along with Chris Situlo, who was the former editor of the editorial page of the Philadelphia Inquirer. When I was at Penn Praxis in the early 2000s, we did a lot of work with Chris and Harris around projects like Penn's Landing, like the future of schools in Philadelphia. And all of those projects were predicated on robust civic engagement, going out to the community, understanding what values were important to the citizens. We then would talk about best practices. Let's say that there was a waterfront development project. We would look to Seattle, to Northern Europe, whatever the kind of best practices of the day were. We talk about those with the citizens, and from those kind of sessions, the values and the principle and the best practices, we'd ultimately get to best practices. Because our job, kind of within the work that we did then and what I do now, is to really offer informed advice to the decision makers in society, whether it's private owners, whether it's the public sector. The citizenry has a role to play, but they're not the sole voice. So it's giving an informed voice to the citizenry to have an impact on the type of development that's being proposed. So I find that civic engagement is the bedrock, really, of any strong development project that we undertake.
Thanks, Harrison. And I just want to say to folks that are putting in questions in the Q&A box, keep them coming. We're going to start getting to them in a moment. We had a question that came in that said, have you reached out to special interest groups like the Schuylkill River Trail, the Bicycle Coalition, et cetera? And that was a question for Jasmine.
So Schuylkill River Trail, I actually sit on the Schuylkill River Development Corporation board. So we are in constant contact with the Schuylkill River Trail. There is a portion of it that is adjacent to the site. So we always want to stay in close contact with them. You know, I never thought about the Bicycle Coalition. Bike share is my baby here under the Nutter administration. That is my baby. It did come through the mayor's fund. I just want to put that on the record. And the Bicycle Coalition was extremely instrumental in making sure that bike share came to Philadelphia. There were not a lot of us at first in the chorus, but Mayor Nutter and me were wearing the t-shirt. So you know what, that's a really great suggestion for the Bicycle Coalition. I would gladly reach out to them. They were really helpful when I was at the mayor's fund.
So maybe we can ask about the process that you've engaged with in terms of government intervention, the city council, city, state, and federal. This is such a huge project with large land use impacts and zoning impacts. What has been some of your work in terms of dealing with our government and our public sector?
So yeah, I talked to the government all day. I was a little tardy logging on because I was on the call with someone from the government. You can't build this project without government intervention. So with city council, we work pretty much with just zoning and permitting and master plan. So planning commission has Yada Johnson. He is very strong and extremely supportive of our project, and we are very, very grateful for that. You know what? I'm going to walk back. I'm going to give you a real picture of the Bellwether district. So we have 2 city council people. We have 2 state reps. We have 2 senatorial districts that we span, and then the congressional districts, and then our U.S. Senate. So we deal with about 9 legislators on just a regular day-to-day update, not to mention our at-large council people and those that are just interested in our site. We are actually responsible for close to 9 elected officials on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So we are consistently talking to the government. City council, we really do more of our planning and our permitting, street ordinances. We are going through a very public process right now to try to make our private streets. Obviously, it was a refinery. Now we want to open it up to the public. So we are right in the middle of that process with city council. It is quite the process, but that is okay. We are happy to go through that, and we want to hear from our neighbors and residents. On the state end, we really are looking at keystone opportunities and opportunity zones and what's available there. We also seek the Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program. So to help us with some of those, that funding has been really helpful. But again, we speak to everyone from the governor down to a state rep, down to a committee person and a ward leader. You cannot build a 1,300-acre site without government being involved, having input, but more importantly, going back to your first question, Andrew, talking to their constituents. That's something that every single elected official has been adamant about here in the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, is that we are involving the residents, getting their voices and making sure that they're comfortable and confident in what we're doing.
I think you're on mute, Andrew.
Yeah, that brings me to a related question we have from the audience, which says, how much of what Hilco learned at Sparrows Point is applicable to the Bellwether district? And is there an unlimited budget of community relations and community engagement, or is it like, how are you constrained and how are you advantaged in that setting?
That's a great question. So for Sparrows Point, that was our first really large project, and we are extremely influenced by it because our SVP of development, our VP of development, and our other VP of development came directly from Sparrows Point. So we are hoping to emulate the success that we had down in Baltimore right here in Philadelphia, and we do have a lot of the same team members working from Sparrows Point now in the Bellwether district. So that's been really helpful. I was not a part of the Sparrows Point, but I talked to my counterpart that's there. He is I think he's the EVP of corporate affairs. He is consistently speaking with me. I'm asking his advice. He's asking my advice. So we work fairly closely with Sparrows Point, but that was our very first big project. And we take our lessons learned from there for sure. And we reference it a lot. And we still, again, have team members. Your next question was around community and do I have an unlimited budget for community? Well, in my wildest dreams, and I'm sure Mia will agree, I would have an unlimited budget for community, but it is a good amount, right? So if you think of all of the interventions, all of our workforce development, and I am not ashamed to say workforce development, we're knocking up against $2 million in investments for workforce development, meaning internships, apprenticeships, community trainings, sponsorships for other students to go to workforce development and reentry programs. We invest a lot of money in community trainings and workforce, but also just in community benefits. We sponsor events from across our city, most certainly giving preferential looks to those that are in South Philly and Southwest Philadelphia. So we do have a budget for that. We are very thoughtful and extremely intentional. Again, most real estate companies don't even have a Jasmine. So we are extremely laser-like focused on things like that. So there is a budget. It is certainly not unlimited. We are a business still, but it is a hefty budget, probably larger than most.
So can you go into more detail about workforce development and talk about some of the estimated 19,000 jobs that are expected to be created in the Bellwether district and how we're preparing Philadelphians to get those jobs?
Absolutely. So like you said, Andrew, we have 19,000 jobs over the course of 10 to 15 years. How do you train for that, or how do you prepare for it? You start today. So we train today for the jobs of tomorrow. We engage in a four-pronged approach for workforce development. So we have a apprenticeship program where we're partnering with the carpenters, and it's called CARP. And we also have a partnership with Sam Staten Senior Apprenticeship Program. And really our goal there, that was one of the first things that we've invested in, is to diversify the building trades. None of us are naive. We know what the building trades look like right now, today in 2023. But we're hoping at Hilco Redevelopment Partners, as we run these pipeline programs for apprenticeship programs, we're going to be able to diversify them one student at a time, over and over and over again, until those building trades really reflect this city. So we are really happy to make very significant investments within apprenticeship programs, and we're always looking for more unions for us to partner with and run more apprenticeship programs. That's very, very important. We also do youth workforce development. So we do internships, partnering with the Philadelphia School District and Philadelphia Youth Network that run our citywide internship program. I also used to work there many, many moons ago. And, internships are really important. I was a Philajob kid, so I know the importance of experiential learning and also internships at a very young age. So that was something that when I came on board, it was one of the first things that we did in the very first summer of 2021 was run an internship program. We do shadow days and career fairs for Philadelphia high school students. We want them to know that there are job opportunities out there for them. We also do community training. So we partner with some local CDCs. Shout out to Southwest CDC. They've been one of our great partners where we do interview skills, resume prep, and dress for success. But really, Andrew, that's just layer one, right? So as we attract more tenants, we're going to start layering in more trainings, and we want to partner with Community College of Philadelphia to really prepare Philadelphians, but more specifically local residents within our 6 zip codes for these opportunities. And then last but certainly not least, we have a reentry focus where we partner with Mural Arts for a women's reentry program, and the Center for Employment Opportunities, which is adjacent to the city, where this year, and they are actually wrapping up next week, which is really sad. These are reentry gentlemen that are beautifying the outside of our site for work credit, and then they'll be able to roll. They'll have the opportunity to roll to our apprenticeship program. If they want to go to community college, we have a scholarship there as well. Or we can even help them get work within one of the unions, as long as they're nonviolent offenders. We partner with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for a program called Build Latino, where we're really building the capacity of Hispanic-owned construction businesses. So not only can they come and work on our site when we're ready, but they can apply for city contracts, federal contracts. We have a partnership with the African American Chamber of Commerce. I mean, Andrew, I could do this all day on workforce, but I will spare us because I know that we're at time. But workforce really is one of our significant pillars and something that we invest heavily in.
Thank you for that, Jasmine. It's a moving target, as you said. It's going to be layered in as the site grows and develops, and I just hope that you'll be able to keep that focus and continue those commitments, because it is a broad and complex array of opportunity that's like a web for folks to engage with. So it's just
That's right. We want multiple entry points into the Bellwether district. Like, our site is so large that if you are interested in working or being connected with us, there is no reason why we cannot find what that hook should be.
So I have a question for Harris. Can you share any insights or key takeaways that you gained from the 2020 Vision project that you conducted for the site between the Lindy Institute and the Clean Air Council? Recalling that experience, what were some of the things that you learned and took away from that?
Sure. So a lot of lessons learned. I'll kind of like try to hit some of the high notes. I think from a planner's perspective, it's all about connectivity. This is a site that literally was kind of fenced off for 150 years, but you've got a city that sort of surrounds it, and the potential to create connections across existing highways, down along the riverfront, to extend trails, to bring people in from Point Breeze and Girard Estates is enormous. We don't think about it because, again, this was a black hole in our imagination. As you were coming back from the airport, it was almost like a dystopian landscape that you'd look across. But when you look at it kind of within the context of the surrounding city, there's significant opportunities to connect streets, to connect trails, to connect parks, all of which, of course, is predicated on ensuring that the remediation ultimately meets standards that can allow for kind of residential occupancy. There are environmental challenges, not only the existing ones that Hilco and Evergreen, the successor firm to Sunoco, are managing, but the sea level rise and climate change, which will have a significant impact, particularly at Girard Point, most of which wants to be a marshland. So how do you kind of manage that over time in a way that's sustainable and resilient, and kind of helps kind of add to kind of Philadelphia's robust park system? Again, it's strategic location, and it's the transportation links in both sea and rail and car, the potential to extend mass transit to the site, either SEPTA buses. You could also imagine possibly a spur of the Broad Street line coming down to this part of the city. If we're building a city within a city, the connection, kind of the potential for connection, is really enormous. There's subtle variations in grade across the site. So there's there's high ground, and there's low land. So where you build and how you sensitively kind of adopt and adapt to kind of those kind of subtle contours, which would have a significant impact on how you manage storm surge and climate change, I think is another important finding from the work we did in 2020. The work in 2020 was a quick study done with the Clean Air Council with funding from the William Penn Foundation. We did a number of community meetings just to kind of get some baseline civic engagement. Then we did a design workshop literally in January of 2020, just as Hilco was purchasing the property. So we didn't know exactly what was coming, but the teams looked at kind of connecting the site back into the city as a whole, and then ultimately putting in a hierarchy of streets on the high ground that could accommodate a variety of different types of uses over time. So again, I might be kind of harping on kind of the issue of connectivity in the grid, but ultimately to me, that's the most important kind of piece as we think about its long-term connections back to the city.
Thank you, Harris. And I remember that process and how engaged folks were. And it just was a kind of precursor to the level of engagement that has been going on over the last couple of years as the plans for the redevelopment have really taken off. There are a number of questions, Jasmine, about environment. And I know that that's not your particular area of expertise, but I wanted to say that we have a couple of videos that you provided to us that are from the Hilco website, and I wonder if Hazel could put those in the chat now. They're not going to answer every question about the environmental work, and I think if people have further questions, maybe it would be good to think about how they can direct those.
What I can do is
go ahead,
kind of
Jasmine.
copy as many of these questions as I can very quickly. And what I can do, Andrew, is when you send out the recording, I can have our team answer the ones that are not my area. I don't see a lot, but I do see two that I can answer live. But anything else, I will bring back to my team and I'll get you your answers.
Okay, that would be great. We could email those answers out to folks who attended the webinar. But if you have any that you can answer in real time, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, no problem. So I see a park over your shoulder in the schematic. Over my shoulder. I'm sorry. Oh my goodness, it's been a day. Yes, okay, sorry, I forgot I had the thing up. And I see what looks like river access for boating. Does the community ask for access to the river and green spaces? Yes, that is one of the top things that the community has wanted, is definitely open space, green space. We are taking everything into consideration. I do want to just put one reminder out here. We are not zoned to do recreation. It was a refinery. So we are working through what that looks like and how we can kind of work around that. But I just want to put that out there. We're actually not zoned to do any level of recreation. We are in R&D and warehouse and manufacturing right now, but that doesn't mean that we're not looking at it. But I guess the original question was, is that something that community asked for? A resounding YES, yes. Let me see. Have you considered creating a bid to manage the site, much like CCD and UCD have done so successfully? As of right now, we haven't been thinking about that. We are just trying to clear the dirt, put the shovel in the ground, attract some tenants, but that's not a bad thought at all. So that's something I'll definitely pass back to the team. But no, right now we haven't considered it. Jasmine, based on any public funding such as RACP funding that you may be getting, do you have any target goals for minority? Yeah, we got the goals. Goals for minority, women, and disabled veteran businesses, as well as workforce to participate in your site? Great question. And that one actually is in my wheelhouse, so I'll answer it. Yes, we very early on, probably 3 months in, got our goals, and they are aggressive. But we are also, as you see, we do a lot of workforce development side. But just to share with everyone, because these are public goals, on the contracting side, we have a 50% minority, a 12%, I'm sorry, on the workforce side is 12%. On the contracting side, it's 5 to 8% women, and we have a 50% local goal. It is tough, right? It's tough to beat that. So when you ask like, oh, are you guys serious about workforce? We have no choice but to be serious about workforce. We also have, right now we have an RFP out for an EOP monitor. So for our economic opportunity plan, we need someone to assist us and monitor. We had one firm that did a fantastic job for us to get us started and really give us the foundation. Now we're looking for a larger firm to do data collection, reporting, strategy sessions with us. We take the goals really seriously. We are laser-like focused on building this thing equitable. From the street names of Francis Harper Drive and James Fortin Way to how we are hiring and contracting with the community and the local residents, even down to our internships. So yes, we have goals. We don't have a veterans goal. Believe it or not, the only city I work in that has a veterans goal is Boston, but that's not to say that we don't focus on it. Okay. Wounded Warrior is a great partner for us. So we most certainly are looking for disabled vets as well, but they're not technically in our goals. So if you pull down our EOP plan from the Commerce Department, you won't see a veterans goal, but it's always in our forefront. We want all to work on our site. Okay.
You know, I'm wondering, Jasmine, if those were goals that you set internally, or were they kind of compelled by a community benefits process? And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about a CBA process that you might be going into.
Yeah, that's no problem. So no, those were not our internal goals. They were put forth by the city of Philadelphia in the Commerce Department and the Office of Economic Opportunity. They thought those were the goals that aligned with our site. And you know, we accepted them. We let them know that we are going to make every effort, and we consistently show that we are making every effort. I do believe that pipeline building is the way to reach the goals. So right now we're 2.5 years into 15 years. I more than expect in 5 years, we are exceeding those goals with all of the pipeline program building that Mia and myself do. Around the community benefits agreement, that's always a hot button, right? Just Google CBA and Hilco and you'll get a load of articles, but I want you to hear it right from the horse's mouth. So we are not required to do a community benefits agreement as of right now. However, we are doing one because we understand the importance of a community benefits agreement within our district. We understand how important this project is to Philadelphia. We understand that a lot of people in South Philly and Southwest were affected by the environmental hazards of that refinery. So we are entering a CBA enthusiastically. We know it's the right thing to do, even though technically we are not seeking any level of overlay that would trigger a CBA, but we are still doing it because we have a responsibility to be good corporate citizens. Now, I will say it has been very challenging narrowing down the groups because we have such a large site. It spans 6 zip codes. It could be 100 groups within that zip code. Really, though, we're relying on the community advisory panel. It was selected long ago because those were the RCOs that were most affected by the refinery. So we really are working with them, but we're also running a public process. We are we are starting a third-party facilitator interviews where we want the community to pick who's going to facilitate the CBA process in the community engagement, because we know that that is a really intimate and you need a lot of trust. And not saying that Mia nor myself have not garnered a trust within the community, but we want it to be neutral. We don't want it to be influenced. We need the community's voices represented, and we really do believe that a third-party facilitator is the right way to do that. So we are making the investment into that as well. And then we just want to start these conversations. So, we are really excited to be approaching kicking off the community benefits agreement. We wanted to make sure that it's an inclusive process. So not only just our CAP's voice will be heard, but we will also be running a concurrent public process in some of our public meetings to get as much community input as humanly possible. So, we are enthusiastically entering the CBA with our community voluntarily.
Thank you for that. I want to let Harris know if you have any follow-ups or any questions, please shout them out. I'm going to give 2 quicker questions to Jasmine and then 1 comment. One is, what kind of access is there to this site? Will cars, trucks, buses be able to get in and out? And the second question is, are you looking to construct the site and buildings using LEED and other sustainable practices?
So your first one, will buses, trucks, and cars be able to enter our site?
Yeah.
Yes, they can enter the site. What's your second question?
The second question is, are you going to be building the buildings to LEED standards and using sustainable building practices?
I work on the corporate affairs department. That would be a question for Dev. Obviously, we are, we are very focused on environment, right? And building environmentally friendly. But because I'm not necessarily versed in LED standards, I would not want to answer that question. So I'll scroll through to see if there's anything else that is good for me. And if everything else, I will make sure that our dev team and our environmental team answer. So no, I think that is good.
And we'll capture the chat and make sure you have all this, Jasmine.
That would be great. Well, thank you so very much.
I'll just offer a comment that we got from Alan Lindy, which was basically to say that the Lindy family business through Lindy Property Management has a significant number of apartments immediately next door, and they want to offer their support and their opportunity to use their community center if you ever wish to present to their residents and the surrounding community. So we're making
Yeah.
connections in real time.
100% yes, over and over. We are always looking to connect with community members, and most certainly would love to do any level of a presentation about the Bellwether District. We have a whole team that we normally bring out with us to answer questions, go over plans. So yeah, happy to do that. Happy.
All right, I've got one more question, then I want to start to move and wrap up. Before one more guest question, and then I'm going to wrap up. Rob Cattell says, will you preserve any of the refinery's history, a small museum on petroleum history in Pennsylvania? Have there been any plans to kind of commemorate the former identity of the site?
So we will not be building a small museum, but we do have, we have saved a lot of artifacts. There is a historical designation on the site. It is a very small house that is on the site. So we are looking at plans to preserve that as well. But there are no plans for a museum, but we do have a lot of artifacts that are like 70, 100 years old that are really cool that we are going to figure out how to display them, whether we partner with a museum. But right now, actually last summer, they were preserved and shipped back to Chicago to make sure that they were safe and that they did not get messed up within our demo.
We have some very good museum people at Drexel. Maybe we should have a conversation about,
Would love that.
we have the Atwater Kent collection, and there are other different people doing collections management here at Drexel. So we'd be happy to help have a conversation about that.
That would really be amazing. We do have, as we were decommissioning the site, we saved a lot of things. We even saved one piece of, remember when you were going over the Platte Bridge and there was a mural on the side of a tank? We even saved 2 pieces of the tank. So yeah, we do have some really cool artifacts. We have amazing pictures. I mean, they're like next level pictures. So yeah, we should definitely talk
about a virtual exhibit or some sort of digital thing. We'll see.
That might be amazing.
So I'm going to move to my last question. I want to start with Harris. This web series is designed in part to tell the story of how people get to where they got to today. Knowing that you both have amazing careers as urban strategists, which is the name we use, can you share with us any big breaks you've had in your career, especially early on, that helped you become what we call an urban strategist? And I'll ask Harris first.
Sure. And I'll go briefly because we're getting towards the end of the hour. I entered it serendipitously, just completely by chance. I was trained undergrad in history from Penn, have a graduate degree in architecture from Penn as well. I had a small practice with my good friend Mike Shade for about 4 years. And then my wife and I worked for 10 years as architects while our kids were growing up. We lived just a couple of doors off of Germantown Avenue in Mount Airy, and it was one of the recessions of the early 90s. There wasn't a whole lot of work. So I thought I'd get involved in the business association, maybe help with some facade renovations or signage or whatnot. At the first meeting, I gave an impassioned kind of plea for kind of saving all the historic architecture and facades along Germantown Avenue. And 2 months later, they asked me to be president of the business association. So here I had 2 kids who were still in diapers at home. We had a very small practice, my wife and I. I was being asked to take over a business association, which I had no experience in, but kind of using just sort of this personal skills in terms of getting people engaged, I began to kind of build up a constituency for change along Germantown Avenue, which ultimately led to a variety of different elected officials showing interest in the avenue. So Ed Rendell allocated some funding for an economic development study of the avenue, all of which I was leading while I was also running a small practice and raising a family. In retrospect, I was sort of planting the seeds for a lot of what I do today, but I didn't necessarily know what to call it then. Fast forward about 10 years in the early 2000s, the dean of the Graduate School of Fine Arts, which is now called the Weitzman School at Penn, asked me to come and found Penn Praxis. And in the early days of Penn Praxis, while the city was trying to figure out what to do with Penn's Landing, I reached out to the Inquirer. Chris Satullo, whom I mentioned earlier, was there. He brought Harris Sokoloff on board. We started a series called the Penn's Landing Forums. One thing led to another. That attracted the attention of the William Penn Foundation. The early 2000s were a time where the Planning Commission had lost the public trust in Philadelphia. There weren't a lot of honest brokers to do the kind of large-scale planning that was necessary, particularly along the central Delaware. So my big break, as it were, was the being asked to lead the civic vision for the Central Delaware, which ultimately over 13 months engaged over 4,000 people in 200 meetings and helped shape the history of the riverfront kind of in a profound way. So I'll kind of leave it at that, but it was really, there were no courses, there was no coursework like urban strategy that we have at Drexel now. You and I, when I first came to Drexel, talked about what does Philadelphia need? We talked about how we got to where we are. And urban strategy really, I think in many ways fits the bill in terms of folks who are coming from a variety of different backgrounds, who want to be urban problem solvers and think collaboratively across multiple disciplines to affect positive change.
Thank you so much, Harris, and we're glad to have you here at Drexel. Jasmine, how about you? What was your urbanist story?
My urbanist story is still evolving, but I think the first time that I even realized kind of what urban strategy was for bike share under Mayor Nutter, when we might have went to Pittsburgh and then DC to look at bikes, and I remember him saying like, "Come on, we're gonna go look at bikes." I was like, "I don't like bikes. Why are we looking at bikes?" He was like, "Because it's this cool thing, and we're gonna bring it to the city." And so I travel around with him, and a whole cabinet of people were there, and I was at the fund, so I was kind of like, I don't know why I'm here. So we get back to Philadelphia, and nobody wanted bike share. Nobody really wanted it. They were kind of like, Otis. At that point, it was called Motu. They were oversubscribed, right? The managing director was kind of like, yeah, I can't do one more thing. So little old me, very early in my career, in this room full of very important people, raised my hand. I was like, the fund will take it. I'll raise the money for it. And the rest was history. I remember going to a meeting with JPB Foundation out of New York so many times to really explain the vision. And it was so much more than bikes to me. I remember, just looking at it and seeing what areas we wanted to put it in and talking to Mayor Nutter over and over and saying, this is a workforce tool. People no longer have to rely on SEPTA in North Philadelphia or South Philadelphia. They can actually use the bikes, and I probably could raise money that way. And at first he was like, Evan, no, it's not a workforce tool. But Mayor Nutter was such a visionary. He let me dream my biggest dreams. And he was like, if you could raise the money for it, go. And that is how bike share came. JPB gave us $17 million. That was the most that we have ever gotten at the fund. Then IBX came and they were like, this could be a health tool. I was like, yes, this can be any and every tool. So that's kind of where I started in urban strategy. But how did I end up at Hilco? It was really just having strong relationships and a great brand in this city where an out-of-town CEO was buying a refinery in South Philadelphia. And, as he was having conversations of, this is a role I have in my mind, but I have zero clue if there is somebody that can do workforce, somebody that can do philanthropy, someone that can do government and has to be really good at government. And he said he heard my name 4 times. And after the 4th time, people that he really likes and respects, he called me on my cell phone, a random Chicago number. I still remember the day. And, he flew to my home multiple times to convince me to leave Community College of Philadelphia because it is my favorite place in Philadelphia, Community College of Philadelphia. It took a lot to get me to leave from there. But I've never regretted it a day. And I'm really excited about Hilco Redevelopment Partners' future.
Thank you, Jasmine. It's the importance of networks. It's really so important.
So
and reputation. Yeah, Harris, are you gonna say something?
Yeah, just before you close, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Lindy family. I see that Alan and Frank are both on the Zoom, and they've been tremendous supporters of the Lindy Institute, as well as many of John Fry's civic engagement initiatives in the university, including the Dornsife Center, and other initiatives. So the Lindy family is an extremely important kind of part of the work that we do. And I want to just kind of say hello to them and give them thanks for their support.
Well, that's a perfect segue as we close out. Hazel, if you can put the link to the Lindy Urban Innovation Scholarships for the Urban Strategy Program in the chat one more time. The applications are due April 1st. You need to apply both to the Urban Strategy Program and then do the very short and simple application for the scholarship. And we will be able to award 4 scholarships that's to take away a substantial part of the tuition and will make the program considerably more affordable to folks. So if you like what you heard on today's webinar and you like the work of urban strategy that we presented to you today, please check in on that website. And there's all kinds of information and videos about the program. testimonials from students and histories of the thesis work that they've done. So I invite you all to take a minute and just browse the Urban Strategy website, which is linked off that scholarship page. And I want to thank you all for coming. I know we didn't get to every question, but we'll capture the chat and we'll send the questions back to Jasmine and see if we can get some more
Absolutely.
back to you in our follow-up communications. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to Tom and Hazel for producing this. And everyone have a wonderful night.